The Rothert Family History and Genealogy, Part 3. Henry. Christian Friedrich and Helena's seventh child was Hermann Heinrich, born January 15, 1848, on the farm north of Holland. He was christened at St. Paul's Church. His godfather was Henry Steinkamp, possibly his great-uncle. On December 24, 1874, he married Maria Elizabeth Hunefeld at St. Paul's Church. Henry was a farmer his entire life. It is thought that he built the current Rothert farmhouse in the 1870s, and it was here that all 6 children were born. Henry and Mary's first daughter, Regina Elizabeth, was born August 22, 1876. Jenny, unfortunately, died March 16, 1881, and was buried at the Mittekirche Friedhof. Sophie. Henry and Mary's second child, Sophie, was born May 15, 1879, and confirmed at the Holland Methodist Church. Sophia Maria was married to Christian Louis Colley on November 14, 1907. Christ and Sophie had 5 children. None of the children married. One died just shy of her first birthday, and one left the farm as an adult. The other 3 children lived on the Colley farm until their deaths. Chris was born February 2, 1875, and died June 1, 1945. The first child born was Carl Christian on September 4, 1908. He died December 14, 1996. The second child was Marie Caroline, born November 18, 1910, and died November 1, 1990. The third child was Frederick Henry, born November 28, 1912. Fred was the only child to leave the farm. He died January 1, 1964. Twins were the last children born to Christ and Sophie. Irvin Harvey and Alvin Daniel were born June 11, 1917. Alvin died in May 1918. Irvin was the last family member to pass away on February 26, 2005. All of the Colleys are buried in the St. Paul's United Church of Christ Cemetery. The entire family were lifelong members of St. Paul's Church. Sophie Colley lived with her daughter and 2 sons on the farm and spoke Lottbergen Platt, a variant of Low German. I'm sure at some point she spoke English, as all of her siblings did. Lottbergen is a city in western Germany. A large number of Lottbergen citizens came to the U.S., including Sophie's mom's family, the Hunefelds. Lottbergen Platt, or a combination of Lottbergen Platt and other Low German dialects, was spoken in the Holland area. Hochdeutsch, or High German, would have been spoken in the schools and churches, but not at home. Memories of Aunt Sophie have her sitting on the couch in her living room with her daughter sitting next to her, translating what was being said. Marie, Aunt Sophie's daughter, was always smiling and laughing and loved having children around. Time stopped for the Colley family around the turn of the century, with the family living basically the same way they had at that time. They had cars and tractors, and there was electricity in the home, but most of the food was grown on the farm and preserved in the kitchen. There was a summer kitchen right off the back porch that included a smokehouse. The main cash crop on the farm was milk. The boys milked their dairy herd twice a day their entire lives, rarely leaving the farm, or if leaving, they wouldn't travel far as they had to return to the farm to milk. They didn't modernize their milking, still milking by hand even as they aged. If you were visiting at the right time, Carl and Irvin would let you try your hand at milking. Quite the experience for city kids. The milk was kept in a milk house, and weekly or so a truck would come by and collect it. Their milk was used mainly for products other than for drinking. They also had chickens, as all farms did, and a large kitchen garden. They often planted corn for fodder or hay for winter feed. They always had a farm dog. Sophie died July 14, 1964 on the Colley farm and is buried at the St. Paul's United Church of Christ Cemetery. Frank. The next child born to Henry and Mary was a son, Franklin Friedrich, born July 9th and died July 17, 1882. Even though both Frank and Jenny died very young, the family would refer to them often and kept them alive in their hearts. Dan. The fourth child born to Henry and Mary was Daniel Frederick on June 17th and christened July 15th, 1883. As a young man, Dan was a school teacher. He also worked at C.W. Jean Company in Henniberg and the Armour Creamery. Eventually, he owned a feed store in Iowa. On April 6, 1911, Dan married Nora Elizabeth Fenneman, known as Bess. Bess was born April 7, 1888, also in the Holland area. Dan was registered for the draft for World War I on September 12, 1918. Dan and Bess had 2 children, Millard Maurice and Ruth Eldor. Dan traveled back to southern Indiana frequently to visit friends and family. On August 22, 1951, Dan was killed in a car accident in Illinois. He is buried in Leon, Iowa. Bess died April 24, 1976, and is also buried there. Their son, Millard, born April 25, 1916, married Della Mae Kinney, D., on November 3, 1937, in Bethany, Missouri. She was born July 22, 1920, in Minneapolis, Kansas. They had 3 children: Eleanor Diane, born February 26, 1939, Barbara Joanne, born August 27th and died August 28, 1942, and Richard Daniel, born September 22, 1947. Millard divorced Della Mae and married Anna Catherine Hartman in 1962. There were no children from this union. Millard died February 18, 1995, in Des Moines. Diane, Millard and Dee's oldest child, was married to Michael Harry Kincaid on August 16, 1959. They had 2 children, Michelle Diane and Daniel Mark. Dan was married and had 1 child. Diane was married to John Emanuel States on February 14, 1977, in Des Moines, Iowa. Millard's son Richard was married to Darlis D. Starr on May 20, 1966, in Wellsburg, Iowa. They have 2 daughters, Lisa Lane and Shelley Danielle. Dan and Bess's second child was Ruth Eleanor, born February 14, 1922. On December 14, 1941, Ruth Eleanor married Daniel Enlow Heisey. They had 2 sons, Daniel George, born November 23, 1942, and David Coleman. Dan married C. Elizabeth Sims and had 2 children, Elizabeth Rivers and Daniel Sims Martin. Dan is a lawyer. David Coleman, Ruth Eleanor's second son, was born July 6, 1945, and married Paula Kenealing on December 20, 1951. They had 1 daughter, Linda Patricia. On June 16, 1963, in Leon, Kentucky, Ruth Eleanor married Marion Fernando Oney. He was born December 6, 1922, and died in April 1992 in Kentucky. Ruth Eleanor passed away on October 3, 2012. Harvey. Henry and Mary's 5th child, Harvey Oliver Henry, was born January 31, 1889. Mary was superstitious about naming children with 3 names, but Henry insisted. Harvey lived his entire life on the Rothert farm. In Henry's will, he left the 119.5-acre farm, worth about $2,000, to Harvey upon Mary's death. Harvey kept a journal of his daily life from 1917 to 1921, which is very educational about life on a farm in southern Indiana in the early 1900s. It is Harvey that appears in and took many of the pictures included in this slideshow, as he was an avid photographer even as a young man in his early teens, a love he passed on to his son Ralph and Ralph's children. Harvey was a practical joker. One story tells of Harvey, his brother Dan, and several friends picking up a friend's car and moving it from the street onto the elevated wooden sidewalk while the friend was in the store. When the friend came back out, he was totally baffled about how his car ended up on the sidewalk. Even when he was older, he liked his pranks. One favorite was his telling his grandkids he wanted to count their ribs, to make sure they had the right number. Of course, all he wanted to do was tickle them, but the grandkids always complied. Harvey also taught his grandkids the Vulcan salute long before Star Trek was ever on TV. There are lots of stories of how he would pull practical jokes on his family and friends. Another joke was putting an air pump of some sort in the pig pond. He would send people over to the pond to look for the big snapping turtle. Then he would slip into the granary and turn the pump on, causing it to burp. Everyone looked and looked for that turtle. Another favorite of the grandkids was Harvey's ability to wiggle his ears. To this day, some of the grandkids are still trying to learn that trick. On June 13, 1915, Harvey married Ida Caroline Louise Bartelt. Ida was a member of St. Paul's United Church of Christ, the church just across the field from the Rothert farm. They met at a church picnic when Harvey bought Ida's pie. After the wedding, they settled in at the farm. Harvey and Ida were active in the Methodist Church in Holland. Harvey was the Sunday school superintendent for many years and played drum in the Epworth League Band. They often had family coming by on Sundays after church or when visiting themselves. Harvey helped friends and family on their farms as needed, and they helped him in turn. Their first child, Wallace Henry, was born February 19, 1917. Wallace was a sickly baby and child, but very smart, earning mostly A's and a few B's in school. Harvey mentions him often in his journal. In late fall 1927, Wallace got really sick. Some say it was tuberculosis, but officially it was pleurisy and heart trouble complicated by asthma. His mother's sister, Sophie Bartelt, was a nurse and came to the farm to help with Wallace. Because he was so sick, Wallace was allowed to pick one of the 2 gifts his parents had bought him for Christmas. He never actually got to play with whichever gift he chose, as he died December 10th at a couple of months shy of 11 years. His younger brother Ralph remembered standing at the foot of the bed when Wallace died, though at 7 years of age he didn't think he really understood what was happening. Harvey and Ida's next child was Ralph Frederick, born November 19, 1920. He too was very smart, and while in school he wrote poems under the pen name Windy. In high school he enjoyed acting and was his senior year class president. He learned to love the outdoors and nature through walks with his mom, where she taught him about glowworms and birds and their songs. He also played often with his cousins, the Collies, usually Irvin and sometimes Fred and Carl. Ralph told stories about them sledding together in the winter. After graduation from high school, Ralph hired on with local farmers as a hired hand. Eventually, he peddled groceries and bought eggs and chickens for a local general merchandise store for a few months. He also took an extended trip to Florida with the Steinkamps, and eventually he hired on at the Holland Custard and Ice Cream Company as an ice cream maker, where he worked for 2 years. Many of Ralph's stories can be found in the book, Down the Lane. In 1941, Ralph joined the Navy and went to the Naval Boot Camp at Naval Station Great Lakes in Illinois, where he graduated honor man of his company. Ralph later attended radio school at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. His first ship was the USS Kalmia, AT-23, a fleet tug, where he served for 18 months. While on leave on September 19, 1944, Ralph married Irma Louise Susett, born July 6, 1921, a woman he had met on a blind date. They were married by Ralph's cousin, Reverend Harry Ring, in the Elberfeld United Church of Christ parsonage, with only the best man, Don Hammer, and the maid of honor, Irma Schwartz, and immediate family present. After the service, they all went back to the home of Irma's mother. They left on a brief honeymoon trip to Niagara Falls on the way to Boston, where Ralph was to get on his ship for his main deployment to the South Pacific. Irma was allowed to board the ship with Ralph because she had security clearance from her job in Evansville. Ralph served on the USS Ringness, APD-100, a converted troop transport ship in the South Pacific. At his discharge, he was a chief radio man. One journal Ralph kept was a detailed diary of his life in the service. His letters home were censored because of the war, but once the war was over, the information in his diary was no longer secret. It too has been published as Ralph's Navy Diary. The diary goes into great detail about where the Ringness sailed, what they did, and the enemy they fought. One of Ralph's most often commented on memories was that the Ringness was one of the first ships to arrive at the location where the USS Indianapolis had been sunk by a Japanese submarine. Captain McVeigh of the Indianapolis was the first to be brought on board, followed by an additional 39 men. One of those rescued died of severe burns on the Ringness. The others were safely taken to Peleliu, an island in the Pacific. After Ralph's discharge, he joined the Navy Reserve for several years. During these years, he worked at a number of jobs, eventually going to college and getting his teacher's degree. He taught history for a while in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where he and Irma lived with Ralph's cousin, Martin Rothert. Martin's wife had recently died, and Irma took care of the home while Ralph went to school, sold vacuum cleaners, and taught school. It was while they lived here that their first child, Lana Kay, was born on October 3, 1948. Over the next few years, the new family moved to several small towns in Indiana where Ralph taught history, math, and science. During this time, another daughter was born on January 11, 1951, Jane Ellen, and a son, Jeffrey Allen, was born on June 2, 1955. Eventually, the family ended up in Evansville, Indiana, where Ralph taught physics and was the head of the science department at Central High School. As science department head, Ralph enjoyed introducing the inner-city students to the out-of-doors, sponsoring several biology trips to state parks in Indiana. Ralph's love for teaching resulted in his winning the Indiana Physics Teacher of the Year award. Ralph also taught physics at night for the University of Evansville and Indiana University Southern Campus during this time. Along with a few other science teachers, Ralph started a small video company making science videos for high school. These videos included several about chemistry, biology, and general science. Eventually, the company expanded their videos to several national parks, primarily Rocky Mountain National Park, in Ralph and Irma's favorite state, Colorado. Ralph and Irma had two loves besides their family: square dancing and traveling. The family started out tent camping and eventually ended up with a travel trailer, camping in national and state parks around the country. This instilled a lifelong love for national parks in all three kids, as well as a love for camping that exists to this day and is being passed on to the next generation. After retirement, Ralph and Irma started touring different countries around the world, primarily with a group from the University of Evansville. Some of these trips were to Greece, China, Europe, Israel, and Australia. They continued camping in their travel trailer until Ralph's death in 1995. Lana, Ralph and Irma's first child, was originally a biology and general science teacher, but later took a civil service job working at the Naval Air Warfare Center Aircraft Division in Patuxent River, Maryland. She married Harold Elliott Siskin on May 26, 1973 at the Methodist Temple in Evansville, Indiana. Harold was born April 4, 1949 and was a fourth-grade teacher before his retirement. Together, Lana and Harold have two children, Janet Kathleen and Bradley J., both born in Leonardtown. Janet is married to Christopher Lee McGuinn and has two children. Bradley married Colleen Elizabeth Clary and had one child before they were divorced. Ralph and Irma's second child, Jane, graduated summa cum laude with highest honors in chemistry from Butler University in Indianapolis, where Ralph had attended night school while the family lived in Markleville. Jane moved to Washington State to attend grad school, where she majored in analytical environmental chemistry. She worked at Patel Pacific Northwest Laboratory on the Hanford Reservation as an analytical chemist for the Multi-State Atmospheric Power Production Pollution Study. She then moved to Illinois in the Illinois State Water Survey, where she was the principal chemist and quality assurance specialist for the Mountain Cloud Chemistry Project. At her retirement, she was the laboratory quality assurance specialist for the National Atmospheric Deposition Program and the Atmospheric Integrated Research Monitoring Network. The main love of her life has been her dogs. Jane has been actively training and showing Shetland sheepdogs and Belgian Malinois since 1975. She and her dogs have competed in conformation, obedience, rally, agility, herding, tracking, and nose work, where they have been very successful. She never married and still lives in Illinois. Jeffrey, Ralph and Irma's third and last child, graduated from North High School in Evansville and attended Purdue University, where he obtained a degree in horticulture. Later, he went to BYU and Utah State University. He worked at several greenhouses as well as the Jasper Rubber Company before becoming a U.S. mail carrier. He retired as a U.S. postal worker in 2020. On August 31, 1985, Jeff married Wilma Joanne Wright, Jo, in Maryland. Jeff started the camping tradition at the young age of 2 and has been camping and hiking ever since. He was active in Cub Scouts as a young boy and ended up years later as his son's scout leader. Together, Jeff's family built a 2-story cabin on the farm in Holland and obtained the 100-year plaque for the last 40 acres bought by Harvey Rothert. Jeff and Jo have two children, Heidi Elaine and Kevin Andrew, both born in Jasper. In 2019, Kevin married Cecilia Melissa Black and have one child. Kevin and Heidi live in Utah. Jeff and his family are devout members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Together, he and his family compiled and printed Harvey's and Ralph's journals. Ralph died September 9, 1995 of a heart attack, and Irma passed on December 31, 2012 in Maryland. They are buried at the Susset Cemetery outside Elberfeld, Indiana. The next child of Harvey and Ida was Harold William, born October 21, 1925. Harold, too, joined the Navy, serving as an electrician on landing ship medium amphibious forces. He served on both the LSM 352 and the LSM 387 and was an electrician's mate 2C at his time of discharge. After the war, Harold came home to marry his high school sweetheart, Marjorie Eloise Boozy, on October 27, 1946, at St. James Lutheran Church in Holland. Marjorie was born January 16, 1926, in Dale. Harold was a milk truck driver around the Holland area for Holland Dairy Products and owned a hardware store with James Nycomb. Harold and Margie had two daughters, Tanya Sue, born November 9, 1948, and Sharon Ann, born October 14, 1955. Harold died June 11, 1992, and Marjorie died July 11, 2009. They are buried in the Lutheran Church Cemetery in Holland. Tanya was a nurse at several hospitals around the southern Indiana area before her retirement. On September 6, 1969, she married James Frederick Hine, born August 9, 1944. Jim is a school bus driver and worked at and later owned Harold's hardware store. Jim and Tanya have two children, Brian Christopher, born April 15, 1973, and Andrea Christine, born March 8, 1976. On March 14, 1998, Andrea married Chad Wesley Schwartz in Holland. They had no children of their own but adopted two boys. Sharon married David Lynn Legers on November 25, 1976. Dave was born October 3rd, 1951 in Jasper and works at Bob Leaguer's Motors in Jasper. Sharon and David have 5 children, 4 of which were born in Jasper. They are Christine Marie, Edward James, Daniel William, Maria Lynn, and Joseph Robert. Chrissy was born March 27, 1978 in Huntingburg. On September 4, 2010, she married Jason Thomas Schmidt in Holland. They have 3 children. Eddie was born March 23, 1980 in Jasper. On June 11, 2016, he married Jessie Elizabeth. They have 2 adopted children. Danny was born September 3, 1981. On September 26, 2015, he married Jessica Fisher, who was born March 17, 1990. They have 2 children. Maria was born June 24, 1983. In June 2006, she married Wayne Neely. Together they have 3 children. Joe was born September 5, 1990. He is a talented musician and author. In 2013, he married Alexandra. They have 2 children. Harvey and Ida's last child, Dorothy Marie, was born January 27, 1930 in Holland. She was a beautician and artist and loved to sing, participating in many choirs and choral groups. On June 11, 1966, Dorothy married Royal Connell Teebybaugh, born October 31, 1921. Royal brought 6 children with him from a previous marriage: Robert Connell, Brenda Fay, Anne Frances, Jane Marie, Joseph Gerard, and Janice Louise. On October 1, 1969, Dorothy and Royal had Angela Lynn. Royal died August 17, 1971, and is buried at the Fairview Cemetery in Jasper with his first wife. On November 17, 1973, Dorothy married divorcee Douglas Allen Kemmerer. He had 5 children from his first marriage, but they lived with their mother for most of their childhood. Doug was born July 22, 1939 in Evansville and died June 2, 2017 in Owensboro, Kentucky. Dorothy died January 14, 2009 in Leesburg and is buried in the Holland Methodist Church Cemetery. After her retirement from hairdressing, Dorothy started painting in earnest, with several oil paintings given to her nieces. She, like her mother, loved singing and would sing as she worked around the house. Dorothy, again like her mom, was always happy and smiling. She loved people, especially her extended family. Dorothy's daughter Angela lives in Indianapolis with her husband, Adam Eugene Wire, married June 11, 2016, and their 2 dogs. Adam was born April 12, 1975 in Muncie, Indiana. Angela is an account executive for Southwest Indiana and Western Kentucky at American Home Shield. Adam and Angela have no children. Harvey died February 11, 1964, and Ida passed on May 13, 1968. Henry died March 24, 1930, and Mary passed on July 21, 1943. All of them are buried at the Methodist Cemetery in Holland. Sylvia Helen was the 6th and last child born to Henry and Mary Rothert on August 27, 1892. On August 31, 1913, she married Benjamin Levi Fink. They had 3 children: Charles Henry, Leroy Elbert, and Robert James. Charles Henry was born February 16, 1915 in Huntingburg. On February 17, 1946, he married Dorothy Pinnock. They had 1 son, Jay Wayne, who was married to Rosalie Ann. Jay Wayne and Rosalie had 1 son, David Scott, who was married to Lauren Ellen. David and Lauren had 1 son, Gregory Chenor. Gregory is married to Carrie Ann, and they have 2 children. Charlie died in 1968. Leroy Elbert was born August 4, 1918, and married Nellie Quinzel Schnook on April 19, 1941. Robert James was born January 27, 1921, in Huntingburg, Indiana. On May 30, 1942, he married Verna Leona Jones. They had 5 children: Ronald J., Shirley Ann, Barbara, Debbie, and Joe. On December 27, 1980, Joe married Jean and had 3 children. Robert died in 1987, and his wife Verna in 2019.
On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. has a wondrous attraction for me. For the dear Lamb of God left his glory above to bear it to dark Calvary. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. In the old rugged cross, stained with blood so divine, a wondrous beauty I see. For 'twas on that old cross Jesus suffered and died to pardon and sanctify me. So I'll cherish